Like that, money is power, which we all know it certainly is. Um, Thanks for that, Kolile. And Jesse, you're saying money, more problems. And I think there's a song around that as well, popular song around that. What else, guys? What other quotes have you heard about money? As we begin to start looking at what money is and why it's important for us to obviously study. Money makes the world go round, and the more you have it, the better it spins. I like that. I like that. I like that. And one of my favorite quotes around money is "Get rich or die trying." And I believe to some extent that that's kind of the truth. It's either you get rich or you die trying. So there's definitely some realness in concern with just money as a whole and its importance as well. Jesse, thank you for that second one. So today, guys, we'll be looking at defining money, describing the money functions, discuss the process of different forms of money, and then defining M1, M2, and M3 money aggregates. And then we're going to end it there. We'll do the discussing functions of the South African Bank Reserve, discuss the factors which influence, explain the causes and changes in equilibrium in the money market, and discuss the instruments of monetary policy. We'll do that at a later stage, being the next time we meet. But for just today, it's just really the four bullet points that we begin with. So I'm going to ask you guys first and foremost to turn your textbooks to page 282. And in the chat, just let me know that you're there. No problem, Jesse. It is page 282 in the sixth edition economics textbook. If you have the fifth edition, please share the page number with everyone else. Let me know as soon as you guys are there. Page 282. There's a awesome Zima. Thank you. All right, excellent, guys. Excellent. So if you guys had to define money in your own words, how would you define money? What is money? Love it. Money is options. Clearly puts across. Zima says money is a tool. Kama says money is freedom. Speak that into existence. And Jesse, something used for trade that has defined value depending on where you are in the world. Brilliant. Now, in your textbooks, it highlights something very interesting for us. Um, on page 282 in bold, underneath the functions of money. It's basically a standalone kind of paragraph. It says money is anything that is generally accepted as payment for goods and services, or that is accepted in settlement of debt. So when we say in this case, guys, anything, it comes down to what Jesse put across in the chat, that it is something that is used for trade that, depending on where you are, depending on where you are in the world, right? And that's what they mean by generally. Depends on where you are in the world, right? And money could be banknotes, could be coins, it could be, for lack of better examples, it could be things like your seashells, it could be anything. As long as we accept it as payments for goods and services, then we're very good to go in that regard. That we're happy and we're like, you know what, it's fine, we accept this. Or if it's in terms of debt as well, okay? Either way, everything underneath that category is basically what money would then be. Now, money has got different functions. It serves as three functions in this case. The first function is a medium of exchange, right? Which means that, and I'm just going to put a number one right there, which means that in this case that, money is accepted by, money is generally accepted as means of payment, right? That's the first one. Money as an exchange medium. I can exchange my money with a good or service that you have, and vice versa. You can exchange the money inside your hands with what it is that I have, right? Goods or service wise. The second, money as a unit of account. And when we look at money as a unit of account, it basically means that at the end of the day, we are able to know how much something costs because it has been put as a unit of account. What does that mean? So I walk into ShopRite. Well, I'm a Woolies fan, so I'm going to stick to that. I walk into Woolies and I look at the shelves. On top of the shelf, you'll find the product that would be on for display to sell. And then right below that, you'll find the price. And that there is what we call a unit of account. I know that if I have that amount in my pocket or more, I can purchase that item. But if I have less, then obviously I can't purchase that item. All right. Then the next one that we see is that money is a store value. And that means that money can be used to store wealth. Now, why is that the case? Why can it be used to store wealth? Well, when we start figuring out how much is Elon Musk worth, how much is Jeff Bezos worth, Oprah Winfrey, Trevor Noah, right? They give it to us in the form of money so that we understand exactly what this person's worth. If someone sat up and said, Jeff Bezos is worth 5,000 two-bedroom houses, right? We would ask ourselves, what type of two-bedroom houses are you talking about? Where are these two-bedroom houses? There'll be a lot of questions that we'll ask in that case. But when we say that money as a store value, we realize that I know a dollar is a dollar is a dollar, a rand is a rand is a rand. So I can actually make the link between what this person has and obviously the financial amount is as well, right? Does that make sense, guys? Let me know in the chat whether that makes sense, and then we'll get to some highlighting on page 282 in the 6th edition. Perfect. Okay, so let's get to some highlighting then. On page 282, right underneath the functions of money, you'll find the following sentence. It has double coincidence of wants between the parties concerned. And what I want you to highlight there is the full sentence and the one before it. It says, if no tailor who happens to want wheat can be found, the farmer will be obliged to exchange the wheat for something else that the tailor does require. In other words, before the exchange of two goods can take place, there has to be a double coincidence of wants between the parties concerned. And all that means, guys, is at the end of the day, if you and I meet and we're doing this barter trading or barter exchanging, I need to want your good and you need to want my good. If we cannot see eye to eye in that regard, we'll need to get a third person involved who will need one of our goods and who will need their good. And therefore, we would be in a space where we're just consistently going back and forth. Kamo? Okamu? We're on page 282. Inside the 6th edition. So that's the first thing for us to highlight. Yeah, so I have wheat made into some kind of thread or fabric. Absolutely. And that again brings extra complexities because it means that I can't get what I want right now. Moving on to the next paragraph, you'll find the words lubricant or intermediary. I want us to highlight that. Money therefore serves as a lubricant or intermediary to smooth the process of exchange and to make it more efficient. This is the first and most basic function of money. Money functions as a medium of exchange. Then we've obviously highlighted the whole money, the definition of money in this case. The next thing I want you guys to highlight is generally accepted means of payment, right? Money is generally accepted means of payment. Okay. And on 100% Christopher, I mean to say. And on page 283, it says there, money as a unit of account. So now we're shifting focus from just the medium of exchange, and now we're looking at it as a unit of account. And the first 3 sentences are the ones that matter there. So I'm just going to read them out. A unit of account is an agreed measure for stating the prices of goods and services. In a money economy, the prices of all goods and services are expressed in monetary terms. Money thus functions as a unit account. And then we'll go all the way to the bottom where you see nominal and real. That last paragraph before money has a store value, money as a store value. It reads the following. The accounting unit function is, however, secondary to medium of exchange function. Money can also lose some of its usefulness as a unit of account during inflation. When prices increase, monetary or nominal values have to be adjusted for price increases to obtain real values, which are more meaningful. So let me just delve into what that sentence is, or those couple of sentences actually mean. So in this case, the first thing that it puts across is that as money is a unit of account, it is secondary to or less important than the medium of exchange. And what that means, guys, is that at the end of the day, if I walk into a store and in that store I look at all of the price tags and rands is on those price tags, it means whatever rands I have, I can obviously exchange for the good that's on the shelf, right? So therefore money forms as a value of exchange. If we agree that this is how we're going to exchange things, then we're perfect. Then money is perfect in that regard. But if I have rands in my pockets and I get into Woolies and I look at a price tag, and on that price tag it says 2 chicken feet, a couple of feathers, and caviar, right? If I get those things, then I will be able to purchase what's on the what you call it, on the shelf. Then we know for a fact that my rands in my pockets, which is a unit of account, they don't matter anymore. So first things first, we need to have a medium of exchange that's agreed upon between you and I. Are we working with rands? Are we working with US dollars? What are we working with here, right? And once we've agreed with that, then we can say, great, it will cost X amount, and therefore it becomes a unit of account. Okay, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know in the chat. There's a question here, does counterfeiting have an effect on this? Not necessarily. We're not there yet. Yes, Christopher?
I believe like would like okay, really not sure if this goes under the store as a store value or under different kinds of money, but I know that for a while in like feudal Japan, the basic form of currency was essentially the amount of rice to feed a person for a year. and exchanges were done using that sort of set amount of rice between people.
Wow, that's a lot of rice.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that was before they started using coins, or I think they used, well, for a while when they were using coins, the counterfeit coins were more valuable than the actual government issued coins.
Was there a reason for that?
I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like because the in essence the counterfeit coins were of better quality in terms of the materials and sort of production than the official coins were.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's something that we'll definitely be looking into, Christopher, as well. So thank you for the heads up in that regard, and thanks for sharing as well. All right, the next sentence in that paragraph, guys, was that money can also lose some of its value or usefulness as a unit of account during inflation. When prices increase, monetary or nominal values have to be adjusted for price increases to obtain real values, which are more meaningful. So as I put across, guys, my favorite store around food is Woolies. And if I jump into Woolies, right? Or maybe I should start here. Inflation, does it make people poorer or does it make people richer? Put it into the chats. Hmm. Anybody else? Thank you, Celine. Yes, sir.
Um, Let me just say, in terms of the value of your money, it makes you
Yeah.
poorer. But in terms of
Hmm.
the amount of money, you could say it makes you richer.
Yes. Yes. And value in that case, guys, we're talking about your real value, but nominal wise, you're more or less still exactly the same. Now, let me just put a quick example of this. So I walk into Woolies and a loaf of bread is 100 Rand. And this is in the year 2020, right? That was, let's say, last year. The year after, there's a 6% increase in inflation. And as a result, that loaf of bread is now 106 in 2021. If I come in that store, being Woolies, and I still have 100 Rand, that means all of a sudden I cannot afford this loaf of bread anymore because I'm 6 Rand poorer than I was a year before. Now, this is the interesting thing about money as a whole, as Tolu was putting across, is that on a year-to-year basis, when people have salary increases, one has to make sure that their salary increase, so I'll just put there some stacks, their salary increase has to be greater than inflation. If it's not greater than inflation, then obviously you're getting poorer. If, however, it is greater than inflation, it means that you can obviously then begin to start buying more. Now, essentially, what sometimes happens is that people will then, or employers might raise your salary by, let's say, about 4%. 4% is less than 6%. So essentially, the goods that you could have bought, or some of the goods that you could have bought, begin to obviously not become affordable. So one always has to figure out how they can obviously beat inflation. Now, the other thing about inflation, guys, is that inflation in and of itself is not the best. It gives us a good picture of what's going on, but it doesn't mean that that is an accurate picture either. Because the inflation for medical aid or just, you know, the whole health sector rises much higher than anywhere else. The inflation when it comes to education also higher is much higher than anywhere else as well. Those two factors are much higher than anywhere else, right? So that 6% is whilst it's a good marker, it's not the best measurement. Okay. So basically what we're trying to say here, even right now, for instance, fuel went up by quite a bit. I think it's about 18 Rand a liter. My salary or the country salary, let me not make it about myself. People's salaries might not necessarily have increased with the fuel prices. And what does that mean? That means that if right now it's about 18 Rand per liter, I think there was a time when I remember I was complaining that it was about 10 Rand per liter. So let's say it was 10 Rand per liter, or rather 17 Rand per liter, which was what it was a couple of days ago. If I had 17 Rand and let's say I only had about 100 bucks, right? I only had 100 bucks. If we were to divide, just bring my calculator out as well. If we were to divide 100 Rand by 17, we would get 5 liters and 880 milliliters, right, of fuel. By just this 1 Rand increase, and I know it's 18 Rand probably in a bit, that now turns to 5 Rand 600 milliliters. Sorry, 5 liters 600 milliliters. And essentially, guys, that means that now there's 280 milliliters that I'm losing out on that I used to be able to afford, but I can't. Now, if I have a full tank, this 280 milliliters becomes to be, it actually totals to a whole lot more, right? Which means that where I used to go or places that I'd normally visit, I then have to ask myself twice, is it actually necessary? Does that make sense? And as a result, it actually affects the whole country as well, because it means that prices all go up and people are obviously worse off because of that, right? So when they talk about it not being the best of unit of account, that's what they're putting across. That at the end of the day, it doesn't really give the real value of what's going on, but it's a great place to obviously have as a nominal value. Do you guys understand that? Let me know in the chat. And then I'll continue on with money as a store value. Yes, Kolile.
So I just have a question. I don't know if you touched on this already, but I think you did. Do different things have different rates of inflation? So, like when they say
Uh,
6%, is that just the average?
yes,
So
yes.
something could be like 20%.
Yes,
Oh,
you're
okay.
100% on the money. And that's why you find that in macroeconomics, when we deal with everything in its context, we look at it from the point of view of a whole industry or the whole economy. But if you really look at the nitty-gritties being microeconomics, you'll figure out that there are some things that are much higher than others. So this is really just almost an average, and an average of certain goods as well, not everything combined. So thank you for asking that. Thank you for asking that. So yeah, definitely always keep that in mind as well, guys. That if your employer tells you that, hey, we're giving you a raise, which is inflation plus X amount, sit down and do the maths yourself with all the products that you'd have bought and ask yourself, can I still buy those products or am I less well off because of it? The next bit, guys, on 283 is money as a store of value. And it says that money is also a store of value. In any society, there's a need to hold wealth in some form or another. Wealth can, however, also be held in other forms. I've just skipped that sentence, such as a fixed property, real assets, stocks, and shares. The advantage of using money as a store value lies in the fact that it is usually more convenient and can be used immediately in exchange for other assets. We therefore say that money is the most liquid form in which money can be kept. But it is not always advantageous to use money as a store value. In times of high inflation, money loses its purchasing power and is not a good store of value. A person who keeps all her wealth in the form of money while their while the inflation is hmm? the form of money while there is inflation will soon realize that her wealth is not retaining its value. Therefore, and I skipped the sentence, therefore, unlike the medium of exchange function, the store value function is not unique to money. Right, and we'll discuss that just now. The store value of function is also implies that money serves as a standard of deferred payment. Right. Now, let me just discuss those ideas very, very quickly. So I'm sure you guys probably know of different places where you can take your money and basically buy an asset of some sort. And that asset over time obviously realizes value. Now I know here they've got things like your stocks and shares and so forth and property. But let me know what other assets could you take your money and basically purchase and use that as an asset going forward? What examples do you guys have in mind in that regard? Yep, a vintage car. Absolutely. 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 What else, guys? Where else could I take my money and basically with that specific asset um have money that or rather have an asset that obviously values much greater in time. Property, absolutely. Yes, yes, watches, gold bars, absolutely, guys. Absolutely. Absolutely. So each and every one of those examples is basically what we call a store of value. And then we realize that money in and of itself is not the only thing that can store value. And the reason why we would want to use these as opposed to just keep the cash is because if inflation hits, I'm much poorer. A country that went through this recently was Zimbabwe. And I was there 2003 to 2004. And essentially, this week, if you could buy a loaf of bread with 1,000 Zimbabwean dollars, next week, you couldn't buy it anymore. And that was the rate of inflation that was happening there. So if I kept cash, it was not worthwhile. So you'd find people that if they could afford stuff today, they would go and purchase everything that they could because next week they will not be able to afford the same goods going forward. That's money as a store of value, right? In the previous class, I was being given examples of your certain performance cars that once they are bought and they go off the floor, when they get to about 6,000 kilometers or so, then it becomes a more expensive car because now the engine has been broken into, right? Same thing with a pair of sneakers as well. There are sneaker collections out there that cost quite a pretty penny. The example that was given in the previous class was that somebody had bought a pair of Yeezys for about 5,500, and that was, let's say, sometime in Jan, right? And we're talking about money as a store value. 6 months later, they bought this obviously from America. 6 months later, who wants to guess how much those sneakers were bought for from her? Just put a number into the into the chat. 10K. Okay. Okay. Getting closer. Getting closer. I'll do two more. Getting closer. One more. Very close. Halfway there. They sold for 44,000 in June. Yeah, man. Yeah. Store value. Now, you can tell me about all the how. There were limited editions. There were limited editions. There were limited editions. Dude, well, come on. You know that there are actually shoes right now that are selling for 230,000. The Jordan Dior's. So 44,000 is nothing compared to obviously this 230,000. And for it depends on your taste. It depends on your taste. It all depends on what it is that is your fancy. That is good ROI, dude. In my mind, I was actually thinking that if I had known this person was going to do that, I'd have gone 50-50 on the 5,500. Now, you can tell me a lot of stuff, but you can't tell me that if I put my 5,500 inside the bank today, if I wake up in June, there'll be 45,000 waiting for me. I'm very certain that wouldn't be the case. Never dazed. So that's the thing, guys. This is what I mean by store value. It's almost putting your money into something and sitting down and going, could it perhaps be more valuable elsewhere? But now the problem is with a decision like that, and I'm going to get to Christopher's point right now. With a decision like that, guys, what ends up happening is that if I do take my 5,000, if I do take my 5,500, right, and I buy these Yeezys in Jan, and I decide to finally sell them in June, guess what? Somebody needs to have that 44,000 and see the value to actually purchase them. If they do not see that value, then that 5,500 that I put in means nothing. And that sometimes is the problem with storing your money in hard assets. Somebody has to see the value of it and purchase it. So you can't go and say my company is worth 1 million, someone needs to buy it. They'll sit down and say, I think it's worth this much to me. And then you obviously have to make a decision in that regard. I hope that makes sense, guys. Now, in concern with shoes are meant to be worn, limited editions are a waste of time and resources. Once again, it's all about preference. It's just like the person who buys really expensive houses and stuff like that, right? Someone might say a house is just meant to be lived in. Why are you buying? It all comes down to taste. Varsity College is quite the some would say it's quite the steep end when it comes to finances, right? But it all depends on obviously what people value. You guys value education and you're willing to obviously foot the bill in that regard. And this is just Varsity College. I mean, if you went to another institution, that might that those these prices might look like, well, that's not a lot. So one has to always realize that it's always relative and it's always dependent on pricing, the value that the person holds to it as well. All right. Is it the same with properties? Like when you reduce the money, when they reduce the money, you'd have to explain what that means, Ria. And as Twilile, exclusivity is expensive, absolutely. Now, in regards to, is it the same with properties? You mean if I want to sell my property, whether somebody would buy it much cheaper? Is that what you're talking about, Ria? Let me know in the chat. Yes, yes. So if I, for instance, decide that I'm going to buy a house, somebody tells me that, you need to invest in houses. Houses are where the money is made and all of that, right? And I buy a house of 1 million rand. And one day, actually, let's be a bit flashy and say 10 million, right? And one day I decide that I want to sell this house for 10 million. And someone tells me, somehow, sometimes people will have to one house copy. Yes, yes, exactly. And then the renters tell me that, look, if ever you sell this house, when I was about to buy it, someone tells me, if you sell this house in the next 5 years, it's going to be worth 15 million. Then I buy this house going, in 5 years' time, I'll make an extra 5 million. What these guys don't tell you is that in 5 years, you are going to have somebody who is willing to spend that 5 million. That your valuation is only determined by somebody who wants to spend that money. If you do not find a buyer, then the value of the house is just basically something that you think it's worth, but it's not worth anything, right? To somebody else, of course. So your money in that case is kind of locked up. You can't really say that you have money because it's all in bricks and mortar. Okay. So value, whilst is definitely seen from the party that has the asset, it really is translated very properly only when somebody else is willing to pay that price. Limited edition records, collectible items, and art I'm okay with, but limited edition of practical shoes are a waste of. I hear you, Christopher. I hear you, Christopher. And in the same breath, somebody else would tell you that, hey, Chris, or Christopher, I mean to say, apologies. Why would we want to buy limited records and CDs? After all, it's just about listening. So one always has to remember that it all comes down to obviously preference more than anything else. So guys, I think we've exhausted this. On page 283, let's just finish off some highlighting there. In the first paragraph, you'll see the words income and wealth in bold. I want you to highlight the following. Money should not, noted. Money should not, for example, be confused with income or wealth, because income and wealth are usually measured or expressed in monetary terms. They are often confused with money. Income is the reward earned in the production process, right? And we talked about that last week. And then if we skip a sentence, it says, the fact that income is calculated and paid in monetary terms is coincidental. Income is something completely different from money. I know in certain countries where there was high oppression, you would find that people were getting an income and their income was actually in alcohol. So someone would say, well done for the week's labor. Here you are, you get a whole case of beer. And that is an income. It's not, it's still regarded as an income. Is it fair? Not necessarily, but it's still regarded as an income. Yes, Christopher.
The builders of the pyramids, like the Great Pyramids of Giza, they were trained professional laborers and they were paid in beer and bread, which in those days, beer was a pretty hot, good commodity. Like, and it was highly valuable, and they were paid with I think there was like some stat like it was each person got each of the laborers got enough beer to over the course of the construction for that it would be fill the same volume as the pyramids themselves. I think that was something like that.
That's yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. But you do raise an important point there, Christopher, because you realize that individuals, depending on the time, that might have been valuable at that person or with that person. Jesse is putting across. I worked overseas a while back. My income was a place to stay and food to eat. 100%, 100%. And I think with depending on, I remember with English students, for instance, that would teach abroad. Sometimes that would be the case. So you can literally sit with someone and say, this is what I will pay you. And that is still called income. So when people say, I want money, you're kind of like, no, what you want is banknotes and coins, not money. Money is an exchange. Going to wealth, guys. Still on the same 283, it says, wealth consists of assets that have been accumulated over time. Wealth can take in many forms, such as fixed property, shares, oriental carpets, or paintings. And then you can skip 4 sentences and you'll see money forms part of wealth, but wealth consists of other assets as well. In fact, many people who possess great wealth do not possess a great deal of money. Quick question. Do you guys know how much Jeff Bezos is worth currently? Yes, Christopher?
Okay, well, I do not know how much it's worth, but like the wealth and money not being the same thing is like you could have like 20,000 rand in cash, but you're not gonna have. It's not a good idea to have that on your person. You like you don't have like you wouldn't. It's not you wouldn't usually have like a like you wouldn't be carrying around a billion rand in your wallet. You'd have it like tucked away somewhere, that sort of thing.
No, fair enough. 100%. Ria, you mentioned, and thanks for the comment, Christopher. You mentioned 200 billion, I think. Very close. Ria, you said changes all the time. Absolutely. And then lastly, Zima, you put across 193 billion, and that's the actual amount. It's 193 billion. But I know for a fact, and maybe I should have checked in his bank account, but I have a very good idea that he does not have 193 billion in his bank account. He's just simply worth that much via business evaluations, asset evaluations, and so forth, minus his liabilities, right? So when people talk about, the rich and the wealthy, you realize it's not really about cash. It's all about assets. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel that at the end of the day, for me, the person who has a lot of money, cash-wise, is always the one who has a lot more options than those that have their assets, their money locked up in assets, especially long-term assets. There's in my previous life, I was a financial advisor, and you'd get guys who would have like 300,000 in the bank, just in case of emergencies and stuff like that. And obviously, they had assets as well, but they kept that as liquid as possible, so that if there was an emergency, they were obviously able to cater to that, right? So that last sentence that says that, in fact, many people who possess great wealth do not possess a great deal of money. It's the truth. Wealth to them takes on a different format. And what's going to be interesting about this chapter, guys, is that by the time we're done with it, most of you are going to see money very, very differently. And I hope that you do, and that you obviously use the lessons going forward within your own personal life as well. I'm just going to look at different four kinds of money, and then we'll go for our break. So just the next 5 minutes, I'll look into that. Um, Then we'll answer those two questions later. So you'll find that over time, guys, firstly, we started with commodities. And commodities in this case are a raw material, primary agricultural product that can be bought or sold, such as copper or coffee, right? So before we'll start with that. And during that time, basically what would happen is that we had what we called a bartering system. But you'd find that, guys, over time, this bartering system was just very tiresome. I mean, if I wanted to get this, then I need to make sure I have this, and so many things, so many complexities. Okay. So then they started saying that we'll do coins from here on out, right? Which at that point in time, the coins that they would give out was iron and I think it was copper, if I'm not mistaken. And what we realize is that iron and copper are very easy to obviously duplicate. And I think Christopher was pointing that out in regards to counterfeits. So they said, you know what we'll do? We'll look for even more rare forms of money or more rare forms of coins. And that's when they started to use things like your gold and silver, right? But now the problem with gold and silver, guys, is that eventually, depending on what I'm buying, it was going to really weigh a lot. So they moved from there and said, you know what we're going to do from now on? We're going to take the gold and the silver, put it into a financial intermediary, aka a bank. And what the bank will do is that they'll issue you with a promissory note, which is the first form of paper. This happened in the 16th century. And with that paper, you were able to go to a merchant and say, I have gold in the bank. I would like to purchase something of your in your store. And you'd give them that note, and they'd be able to take that note and go to the bank and get your gold bars or gold coins, right? That's how it used to work in the past. What eventually then happened is that people said, we can't be going to the bank consistently to go and get our gold. Instead, let's just work with paper that promises that there is money in the bank or there is gold in the bank. So bank said, that sounds good to us, not a problem. We won't be then moving these gold bars around. Instead, what we'll do is that you can hold on to the paper and you can exchange it amongst each other. But what eventually happened is that there were more banknotes than there were gold bars and so forth. So they shifted from that idea and said, from here on out, then, guys, what we're then going to do is that we're going to abolish, and this was in 1930, we're going to abolish the gold standard, and instead we're just going to work off confidence. And since then, that has been the case until now. So now we work with paper money as of 1930 onwards. And things like credit obviously have come into play where we don't necessarily need to have the money right now. We can have it at a future date. So I'll get the cash right now and then give you whatever you need at a future date, which is an agreement between the lender and a borrower, right? And that's really been the evolving or the evolution of money, starting with commodities, going to coins, from coins to paper money, and then obviously to credit. Let's have our 10-minute break, guys. And then when we return, we'll look into some highlights in our book and the next topic, which will then be money in South Africa, where we'll really deal with what wealth should look like. I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. Right, guys, it's 2 o'clock by my watch. Let's move on with the lesson. So let's define M1, M2, and M3 money aggregates. So you'll find that when it comes down to money, they're divided up into three different categories. The first category is M1, and this includes coins and notes, as well as all demand deposits or domestic private sector with monetary institutions, right? And the equation there is M is equals to CD, M being the quantity of money, C being cash, and D being demand deposits. And we're going to get a bit deeper as to what exactly this all entails. M2, however, is M1 plus all other short-term and medium-term deposits of the domestic private sector with monetary institutions. And sometimes this is called the money plus quasi money, right? And we'll also get into detail as to what that means. Then you get your M3, which is M2 plus all long-term deposits of the domestic private sector with monetary institutions. Now, what's interesting about this whole aggregate and so forth is that when you are at this point being M1, and I'm just using ME as money exchange, the money exchange here as a function is at its highest. But as you begin to start going towards M3, the money exchange begins to start dropping. Now, just a quick question, just to get your alertness going and juices flowing as well. Tell me, what is money exchange in this case? What does it mean when they say that the money exchange begins to drop? What does that mean? Yes, Trilile.
Does it mean your ability to exchange that form of money for goods and services?
Bingo. Bingo. Absolutely, sir. It means exactly that. So it means that if I have a lot of M3, the chances of me saying, going to Woolies and saying, guys, I would love a packet of chips. I'm willing to give you my house. 0 to none, right? That doesn't work out like that. On the other hand, guys, the other idea that I'd also want to share here would be the following as well. That when it comes to money as a store value, and if someone can just maybe just let us know, what is the definition of a store value? Let me know either via the chat or you can unmute the mic as Lilia and Chris have been doing. What is the store value of money? What does that mean? The store value of money. What does that mean? Go ahead, go ahead, sir.
I'm not too sure about this one, but is it like essentially, how can I put this? How well your money like can age without being touched, or how secure it is without being touched, and how much it
Mm,
it increases from being stored, or the
okay.
security of it, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but if I have a house, I know the value
Hmm.
of that house is not going to fluctuate as much as money in hand, for example. And also over
Mm,
time, property usually appreciates, as much as
Yeah.
savings also gain interest.
Yeah, yeah, that would actually be on the money. It's basically you storing your 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 money in a different form, right? So a watch, totally you put across a house, that's the store value, right? And then we obviously take the the money as a unit of account to say your house equals 10,000 or sorry 10 million um rand, right? That means that you have 10 million, but it's in the bricks and mortar, which is a form of wealth in this case. um Jesse, you said when the money is used in exchange for an asset and the value of the money is then stored or converted into an asset. Absolutely. So why I bring that up, guys, is that you'll find that the store value at M1 is much less than the store value at M3. So basically, the store value increases as you begin to go to M3. Let me know in the chat whether that all makes sense, and then we'll get down to some highlighting. Okay, I'll take that as everybody understood what, or rather has a good idea of what we've been sharing. So we're going to go straight ahead into highlights. If you've got any questions, guys, please put them into the chat. Don't hesitate. Go right ahead. Let's get some highlighting underway. On page 283, subject title 14.2, you'll see different kinds of money. I want you to highlight the following. The earliest forms of money were commodities, where the intrinsic value of the commodity was equal to the exchange value assigned to it. Next book to highlight will be uniformity, durability, divisibility, and carried. So it says here, properties such as uniformity, durability, divisibility, and the ability to be carried were not found in all commodities. For example, cattle are not divisible into change, nor can they be carried around easily. Second bit, on page 284, right at the top corner. It says, in due course, this type of commodity, money made way for efficient coins made of various kinds of metal. Initially, iron and copper were very popular forms of money, but when they became too abundant, they lost their value and were replaced by scarcer metals such as silver and gold. Second bit to highlight there. In time, however, the exclusive use of coins as a medium of exchange also became inconvenient as the increasing specialization of production led to greater dependence on trade. Particularly in large transactions, the coins became unworldly, and difficult to handle. This in turn led to the use of paper money, which first appeared in England in the 16th century. The owners of gold or silver or silver deposited it for safekeeping with the goldsmiths of the time, I mean to say. In exchange for such deposits, they received certificates of deposit, and these certificates could then be transferred to other people to pay for the goods and services. The certificate of deposit was the first form of paper money fully covered by the metal it was supposed to represent. Right at the bottom of that page, it says the total value of the paper money in issue was greater than the value of the gold backing it. Such money is called fiduciary or credit money. Ria, that is very, 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 very good link. So it would work like a check, yes. Not necessarily a check, but it would work exactly like a check, where you would have an amount that you would have been given or amount that would be written on a piece of paper, and then you'd go somewhere else and say, hey guys, I've got X amount of gold. I want 1, 2, 3, which costs X amount of gold. Can you give me the change? Write it down, and then you can obviously go and cash this at the bank, just as they did with the check. So very good comparison there. The next bit that I'd want you guys to highlight would be the last sentence just before the box 14.1, 284, left column. The total value of the paper money in issue was thus greater than the value of the gold backing it, such as the, sorry, I did mention that, fiduciary or credit money. The modern banknote, which is in use today, bears no relationship to the commodity, and its value is based solely on confidence in the government or monetary authorities to implement monetary policy in such a way that the purchasing power will not fail substantially. What that typically means, guys, is that at the end of the day, the money that's going around is not backed by a specific asset. And it's a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing in the sense that it means that there's a lot more money walking around. Bad thing in the sense that whether that money is of value or not is a different story. For instance, if you were in Zim during the years that obviously the money began to lose its value, you'd find that in that case, the government was not necessarily um, keeping to its fiduciary duties. And I say that with great respect as well. Now, to also get to your point, Ria, the last paragraph on page 284, last paragraph on the right-hand column, it says the following, right above box 14.1. The next important development in the evolution of money was the use of check and current accounts. For a long time, bank deposits accessed by means of checks constituted the largest part of money stock. The situation is still essentially the same, except the checks have largely been phased out and bank deposits are mostly accessed by means of electronic transfers, debit cards, and the like. And then box 14.1 goes into checks, EFTs, debit cards, and credit cards, right? I'm sure you guys have definitely seen checkbooks, right? Just put in the chat box that you have seen checkbook before. Um, I'm sure your parents probably had a couple. Yes, you have. Absolutely. Personally, when I saw checkbooks, I was just like, one of these sweet days, one day, I will be able to sign a check and obviously give it towards someone. And I remember when I was in high school, at the end of every month, my dad would come to the school and he'd have three separate checks for myself, my brother, and my sister. Okay, that was in Botswana, and he was very consistent with that. Now these days, you don't do that. You basically sign a contract, and within that contract, you either have a debit order that goes on a specific day, and you give them your bank details to let them know you can take the debit order on such and such a day. Right? So things have changed. Things have changed. There are friends of mine that have got black cards, and what they were complaining about recently was that, and obviously this is first world problems clearly, um, that they're in a space where they're like, I'm not traveling a lot, Grant, and because I'm not traveling a lot, it doesn't make sense in me actually having this status of having a black card anymore, right? So instead, I'm gonna just go back and get your gold card and keep it that way because I'm not necessarily benefiting off of that. And now if we make purchases, guys, so the traveling obviously stopped. If we make purchases, and the reason why I bring that up is that what we do to make purchases is that I have my card, I go to an online store, I put in my card details, and immediately the money is taken, and that's it. So they were questioning, do I really need to have all these benefits if that's all I need to do with my card these days? So things have changed. I mean, if you think about a long time ago, how you'd probably have to write a check, send that check over to wherever you need it to be sent, and then from there they would obviously cash in that check and then say you're good to go. They can give the goods, and that's how sometimes checks would also bounce. Because what a check does is says that I've got X amount of money. So as soon as I give it to Ria and I'm like, here you are, Ria, um, you now have a check for 10,000 Rand. You go to the bank and there should be 10,000 Rand inside my bank account. If there's not, however, then guess what? The check bounces. The bank calls me and says, did you issue with a 10,000 Rand check? In which case, I'll probably say yes or no. And if I do that a couple of times, the bank might say, we can't let this person issue our checks anymore. Or you'll pay a very hefty fine for that as well. Right. And that's to do with the different kinds of money. Moving on to money in South Africa, on page 285, I want you to highlight the following, right? And this is a very important chapter. These concepts, guys, are pretty important. So just make sure that you are, when as soon as you've done highlighting them during the weekend or next week sometime, you go through these concepts again. It says they're under the conventional measure of money. M1 includes coins and notes, as well as all demand deposits of the domestic private sector with monetary institutions. Note first that only coins and notes in circulation outside the monetary sector constitute a part of the money stock. The reason is that only cash in the hands of the public can be used as a means of payment. And then you go down to the monetary sector in bold. The monetary sector in South Africa includes the South African Reserve Bank, Corporation of Public Deposits, the Land Bank, Post Bank, private banking institutions, and mutual building societies. Next bit. Secondly, demand deposits refer to deposits that can be withdrawn immediately by means of a check or electronic funds transfer, EFT, which is currently what you guys have in your bank account. So right now, all of us basically have M1 type of money, right? Right now. And the next bit goes with means of payment. Everything that normally serves as means of payment is included in the M1 definition. This definition of money can be written in the form of an equality as follows. M is equals to C plus D, where M is the quantity of money, cash is C, and demand deposits is D. Now, contrary to what you might expect, D is far the largest component of M1. And what does this mean? This means that if you walk around right now, um, chances are you don't walk around with cash. Instead, you walk around with your cards, which obviously have money inside the account, right? And that's what they mean by you. If you look at that example there, it says 124,946,000 was basically what individuals, the country had as coins and banknotes all around. On the other hand, demand deposits, which is money that was inside accounts, was, in this case, if that's millions, then that should be 1,651,480,000 rand. That was obviously in demand deposits, which is why things like Yoko, I don't know if you guys know what Yoko is. If you do, just say yes in the chat. Yoko and Ikoka were obviously made because at the end of the day, what would happen with entrepreneurs, nice Jesse, what would happen with entrepreneurs is that they would realize that I'm trying to sell my goods and services at these local markets, but I don't have a means for these guys to obviously purchase stuff because they're not coming with cash anymore. They only have cards. So Yoko and Ikoka sat down and said, we're going to make card machines, right? And as a result, now entrepreneurs or startup entrepreneurs that have products and so forth can obviously sell their goods, which is also something I've also realized in my own life because out of sight of this, I obviously have a publishing company. And one of the things that we do is that we sell books. and help people obviously publish as well. So whenever I'd go to events, I realized if I did not have my card machine with me, I obviously lost out on sales. My sister had a restaurant that I worked in, and we used to use a Yoko. Absolutely. It's a preferred source of payment. And they actually charge less than your um, bank account card machines as well. So I completely get that. I'm sure you guys have also heard of Snapchat as well, right? Slightly more. I beg to differ, but I hear you. Used, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I actually, for my business, I've actually just ordered a new Yoko for card machine for use for my business, and we compared it to our current card machine, which it's ever so slightly higher uh, of a on top of the ever so slightly more of a fee on transactions.
Tell me though, in regards to your the card machine that you had before, which bank was it from?
NetBank.
Nedbank. So I'm guessing that you paid per transaction and you paid a monthly fee as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when I say in total, I'm talking about not just the transaction, but also the fact that you'd pay a monthly fee. Because I know with Yoko that's not the case. Last I checked.
Yes. Yeah, we were also renting our previous one because it was actually, in
Mm,
theory, cheaper than buying it outright. Because in the
fair
case
enough.
of in the case that it broke or got damaged, that we could replace it without having to pay for a new one.
Mm. No, very wise decision there. And if I was in your shoes, I would have definitely done the same thing. If there was no such thing as Yoko or Ikoka, I'd have definitely gone with just renting because I don't want all that risk. So smart decisions on your side.
Yes.
Right. Moving right along to, and thanks for that, Chris. And Jesse, thank you for your suggestions there as well. On page 285, there's a broader definition of M2. And M2, we said M2 is equals to M2 is equal to M1 plus other short-term and medium-term deposits of the domestic private sector with monetary institutions. Right. Now, what are these deposits? It says that they are deposits invested for a certain period, less than 30 days for short-term deposits and less than 6 months for medium-term deposits, and can only be withdrawn earlier at some cost. So I know with FNB, there are things like your 32-day account. That is a form of M2 money, money that you can't have access to immediately. And if you do get it, then you obviously pay for it. It also says they therefore regarded as quasi money. M2 can thus be defined as money plus quasi money as well. Quasi money being that it's near, but it's not close enough. On M3, the most comprehensive measure of money, it says M3 is equal to M2 plus all long-term deposits of the domestic private sector with monetary institutions. Then we'll skip a couple of sentences. We'll look for the bold letters which says store of value. And it says, note that M3 is a reflection of the store of value function and not only the function of money as a medium of exchange. As we move from M1 to M2 and M3, the emphasis on the medium of exchange function decreases while the emphasis on the store value of the function increases. To summarize, although there are different technical definitions, money essentially consists of coins and banknotes in circulation and bank deposits, with the latter being the dominant form of money. And then we have box 4.2 that talks about whether electronic money is really money. And I find that to be a very interesting discussion because right now, if we all look into our bank accounts, it's all electronic. It's not necessarily cash. There's a guy called, what's his name? Aloko or Ayoko Dangote. I don't know if you guys know of an entrepreneur that's called Aliko, I think, Aliko Dangote. He's Nigerian and he basically, Aliko, 100%, Aliko Dangote. And he basically owns a cement company in Nigeria. I think it's one of the largest. And one day he's pretty rich. He's actually a billionaire. He went to the bank and he's like, I have not seen my money. Um, richest African. Okay. And he said that I have not seen my money. So what I want to do is withdraw 10 million. I think it was US dollars. 10 million US dollars. So he got about 10 million US dollars. They put it into, I don't know where they put that money. But then when he went home, he was then able to look at it and go, oh, okay, so this is what 10 million looks like. But until that point in time, everything was just figures in a bank account. So one of the things that they're asking is that really money? And I don't know what you guys feel, but let me know. Do you guys feel that the digital money that you see on your apps or on your ATMs, is that real money or not? Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else, guys? Thank you for that, Chris. Anybody else, guys? Is electronic money real or not? Yeah, it is very easy to manipulate. Zima says, 100% agree with you, clearly. Zima then says, it's not exactly real money in terms of a situation where the bank goes bankrupt, your money is gone with it. Okay, fair enough. I think, and Jesse says, I think that how money has been valued has changed over time. I think it is money, but not a true value of gold or other resources. Absolutely, guys. Absolutely. So we go back to our definition of money, and we realize that the definition of money is that it's anything that is generally accepted as payment for goods and services, or that is accepted in settlement of debt, which is also why cryptocurrencies and stuff like that is a big debate, as is, because some people actually accept it as a form of payment, and in which case that does form money according to this definition. But I also I'm weary to really call it that. But according to the textbook, that is the case. And to order past this module, we'll take it like that, but we'll definitely debate it further, I think, in future as to whether that is the case or not. Let's quickly talk about financial intermediaries. And in the chat, just let me know what financial intermediaries you guys know of. You can just start placing them. I just need about maybe 5 examples of financial intermediaries that you guys know of. Chris, you say, I prefer to be able to feel the weight of how much I have to see how big the pile is. Stuff like that. Man, you are speaking my language. I agree. 100% agree. But what financial institutions do you guys know of? Let me know. Banks, absolutely. You've taken away like 5 examples that we could have used in short to drag. I hear you, Christopher. I hear you. Banks, investment houses, pension funds, yes, yes, and there are places that actually manage that as well. Yeah, yeah. Guys, very important, very, very important. Financial intermediaries are very important because they really take a lot of our money. Offshore investments, absolutely. Provided we know what entities they are. So I know with your pension fund, there's a special place that actually takes care of that. I've just forgotten which. Apart from your normal Liberty Lives, Old Mutual, those insurance houses as well. Credit unions, yes, sir, that as well. I'm just going to read your in your textbook. It says on page 286 underneath financial intermediaries. With the advent of money, a group of institutions emerged that specialize in purely financial transactions. These transactions can be distinguished from real transactions by the fact that no goods or non-financial services are involved. The next bit, it says real transactions and financial transactions. The distinction between real transactions and financial transactions can be used to divide the economy into real and financial sector. And then we would skip 2 sentences to the bold bit there. It says, to act as an intermediary between the surplus units and the deficit units in the monetary economy. In other words, they facilitate the flow of funds between surplus units and deficit units in the economy. Guys, if there's anything in life that I want you to aspire to be, apart from all the goals, dreams, and desires that you have, ensure that you're a surplus unit in the economy. And basically, that is basically the person that has enough money to put away. Um, the deficit units, however, are the people that are obviously searching for finances, right? Which means that most of the time they're not necessarily in the best of areas. Still on page 286, right up top, it says surplus units and deficit units. Please highlight the following. They are called surplus units and deficit units respectively. Although the surplus units and deficit units can contact each other directly, the vast majority of financial transactions occur via a financial intermediaries. We skip the next sentence. Credit is granted when a person or institution lends funds to another person or institution. In exchange for the funds, a piece of paper known as a security or credit instrument is normally issued. This document stipulates the interest rate at which the funds are loaned, as well as when and how the loan is to be repaid. Brilliant stuff, right? And that's to do with financial intermediaries. If you look at box 14.3 on page 287, it gives you a very, very good outline of how this works. So you have savers on the left-hand side, which are surplus units. And really, I feel the difference between those who have money and don't sometimes comes to as little as, do you have a budget in place, right? And having a budget lets you know, am I spending more than I should, or am I spending within my means? So these households, whether it be households or firms, they save money. Ha, good. The A financial advisor would not necessarily be a intermediary, they would be an agent in that process. So they would facilitate that, but in and of themselves, they're not necessarily an intermediary. I hope that makes sense. Not a problem. Yeah, and financial advising, I think if you ever decide to endeavor into that, that's, I believe, a very cool job. It lets you really know about people's psyches when it comes to money and stuff. Really enjoyed my time there as a financial advisor. But back to the lesson at hand. And concerned with, I'm sure you guys remember this. We had financial institutions in the middle when we're talking about the circular flow. Financial institutions, I'm just going to call it FI. And then we had C on one hand. What was C, guys? Remind me, what was C in this case? Cash, not necessarily. We had I on the other hand. Yes, Ria, 100%. Household. And households and financial, not financial, households and investment, um, households and firms, sorry, would then put across savings, which we denoted by S. So this is what they're talking about. And then these guys would then give your investment spending. I'm just going to put INV spending. They would issue that to your firms, who will then obviously spend the money on something that would obviously grow their business and the like, right? So we have savers on one hand. Now we've got two types of financing, direct and indirect. If it's direct, it just means that we deal directly with your firms, your government, or your households. And in return for giving people funds directly, what will then happen is that they will give you a security to say that I will pay at such and such a time, and so on and so forth. The only problem with this, guys, is that it becomes very risky because there's no sense of whether you actually fulfill your obligation or not, right? Whereas when you look at indirect financing, where financial intermediaries would then lie, you'll realize that the funds go to the financial intermediary, and those funds then go to the borrowers, whether it be firms, government, or households. And in return, they will give the financial intermediary a security and that financial intermediary will give you a security. So in this, you deal with only the financial intermediary. You do not deal with your firms and government. Now, here are the pros and cons of both. Your financial intermediary will always take a slice of the pie, being the middleman, but they take all the risk. On the other hand, if you go through direct financing, they you take more of the pie in concern with, let's say, if you charge interest and so forth, but you will then obviously have to take the risk as well. Now, what we were told as financial advisors was that you'd find an investment house will maybe take, let's say, 10,000, right? So you decide that I'm going to save up and I'm going to save 10,000 rand a month, right? So we'll put ourselves as households for now, and here's the financial intermediary. And then on the other hand, we've got our firms over here, right? So I save, or you save, or we save 10,000 Rand, right? What these guys then do with the 10,000 Rand is that they issue it out to a financial, I'm sorry, a firm, right? And as a result of issuing it out to a firm, they issue that out obviously at an interest rate as well. Now, do you guys think that the interest rate that they will give you for the 10,000 that you've saved will be the same interest that they're going to charge the actual firm? Let me know in the chat. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, and it's shocking sometimes, but what would end up happening, depending on the financial institution, right? Because they might put the money into property or they might put it into, certain places. They could make upwards of sometimes 400%. So if we take 10,000 and we multiply it by 400%, 100% of that, let me actually just put that down. Should be about 40 grand, if my math serves me correctly, right? So if we're talking about 40 grand, and then they say what we're going to give you guys is maybe 10%. So you make 1,000 Rand here, and they basically would then take home, in this case, about 29. That's not true. I'm just trying to do the maths here. 30,000 minus 11,000 should be about 29,000, yes? And they'll take home about 29,000. If obviously their deal goes through very well. If they fail, however, they still need to give you the 10% on that amount, the 10,000 Rand, right? So they take risks and therefore they get rewarded for that. But I mean, 400% is quite a lot, if you ask me. So quite a lot in the sense of, good money to make. So that's indirect financing for you. These guys obviously know what they're doing with your money, and as a result, they obviously make a whole lot more. And if you knew what they knew, then chances are you'd obviously be able to take the risk as well. But that risk means that if you fail, you obviously have the brunt to deal with. Moving right along, though, guys, let's quickly look at 4.5, the demand for money. And this will be basically the last bit, and we'll call it a day. Probably we'll just end it here, actually, guys. In concern with what we've just discussed, guys, let's tackle this specific question. Define the different measures of money in South Africa and how they're linked to the functions of money. Let me know in the chat. What are the different measures of money in the South Africa and how are they linked to the functions of money? Let me know in the chat, or you can put on the mic and give me a shout. So interesting enough, that would actually be the case. That is a form of money. It is a form of money. Whether it is a measure of money, and we're talking about South Africa broadly, not necessarily, but it is a form of money. Lobola and dowry is a form of money. Yes, Qilile.
When we're talking about the measures of money, I'm guessing we're going to be referring to what we just spoke about, the M1, M2, and M3. Um, and then if I could simplify it, I'd say M1 is essentially like cash, immediate money, or the most liquid. No, let me not use liquid, but yeah, it's cash,
Mm-hmm,
coins, money in the bank account that you have easy access
mm-hmm,
to.
mm-hmm,
M2, you start now including things such as short-term and medium-term deposits. So money that you can access not immediately,
mm-hmm.
but within a reasonable amount of time. So it's M1 plus that, and then M3 is where money gets long. So it's M2 plus long-term investments, essentially.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then how they're linked to the functions of money, I think it's in terms of how you use it. So if you look at M3, that's where we'd probably link that to money being a store value, I think, since that's money that's usually
Yes.
going to sit and you're not going to use for a while. If you look at M1, that probably links to money as a medium of exchange. And then M2, I'm not necessarily sure what that would sit.
Okay. No, that's absolutely brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant, guys. That in essence is the measures of money, M1, M2, M3, and obviously the definitions that you gave. Thank you, Lila, for that. How they link to the functions of money, exactly as you portrayed. Um, they are mediums of exchange. M1 specifically, more so than the others, and they are also units of account, which means that we know how much we have as a value, and then they also look at store value as well, meaning that um, we can access wealth, or understand how much wealth you have, and more so at M3 more than M1, and that's basically how they are linked to the functions of money. So now that you guys know what you know, tell me, where do you guys feel that wealthy people put their money most into? M1, M2, or M3? Absolutely. 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 So it's great, guys, to definitely have M1 money. We should all, strive to do that. It's definitely great to have M2 money, but by the looks of things and our discovery just around this specific session that we've run, we realize that most of the wealthy put their money in M3. And as I said at the beginning, um, people who are wealthy see money very differently. And when we begin to start looking at it from the point of M3, in the sense of maybe I should have a good store value, as I obviously have cash and stuff like that as well, it allows you to start building assets as opposed to merely just having, money. So it's not just about having the money, it's really about getting the assets at the end of the day, which will hopefully make sure that you have money at the end of the day as well. Guys, this concludes today's session. The next time we meet, we'll go ahead. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard something. Um, the next time we meet, guys, we'll work into your 14.5 being the demand for money. There'll be some graphs there. 14.6, 14.7, and 14.8. What I would ask, and 14.9 and 14.10. What I would ask, guys, is over the weekend, go through the highlights that we've had. And before the next lesson that we have, please go through the rest of the chapter, so that when we do meet up, the things that we do discuss, you'll be able to at least grasp better because there'll be repetition, as opposed to it being completely novel and completely new. You will have an ICE task that will be out by Monday, or let's say because Monday is a holiday, So let's say by Wednesday, you will have an ICE task that will obviously be out by then, which will really deal with Unit 1, and then Unit 2 will obviously be the week after, provided we are done with the course material by then as well, if I don't merge them. But from here, from me, that's to do with everything that I needed to cover for today. Do you guys have any questions? If not, enjoy the rest of the weekend. If so, I'm still here for the next 10 minutes. I'm more than happy to be of assistance to answer your questions. Pleasure's mine. Pleasure's mine, Jesse, Ria. Very welcome. Thank you. Very welcome, Zima.
Excuse me, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Who's speaking? I'm just trying to look at the. Yes,
Oh,
come.
sir, it's Gamo. Sir, I just wanted to know, sir, will the slides be up on VC Learn?
Yes, they will be. I think the first unit ones are already out. The second unit ones will be out once we are done with the full unit.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.